The rain had started gently, as if the sky were whispering its sorrow into the world below. Tiny patters on the rooftop, soft enough to be mistaken for dreams. Inside the old cottage tucked at the edge of the woods, warm lamplight glowed against the misty windows. It was the kind of night made for wool socks and chamomile tea, for lingering over words that don't need to be said aloud. Mara stood at the window, cradling a mug between her hands. She watched the drops trace lazy paths down the glass, her breath fogging a small circle in front of her lips. The storm wasn't angry, not yet. It was the kind that hummed low in the background like a lullaby from the earth itself. But there was a feeling in her chest she couldn't name, something wound tight and waiting. Behind her, the fireplace crackled softly, casting shadows that danced along the wooden beams. She didn't look when she heard the creak of the floorboards. She knew it was him, Caleb. He came up beside her, his presence silent and steady, like the way dusk settles into the corners of a room. "It's really coming down," he murmured, his voice deep and quiet like velvet against her nerves. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes followed a single droplet as it raced another down the glass. "Do you think the road will flood again?" she asked. But what she really meant was, "Do you think we'll be stuck here together a little longer?" He leaned just a little closer, and she felt the warmth of him seep into the side of her. "Probably," he said, the ghost of a smile in his voice. "Not that I mind." They hadn't meant to stay the night. It was supposed to be a brief stop on a long drive north, a place her grandmother used to own, left to dust and quiet after she passed. But the storm rolled in faster than expected. The roads washed out behind them, and suddenly the cottage was more than just shelter. It was pause. It was memory. It was something neither of them wanted to leave just yet. The lights flickered once, then again. Mara stiffened. "It's just the wind," Caleb said, reaching past her to close the curtains. "Old wiring." But she wasn't thinking about the wiring. She was thinking about the box she'd found earlier, tucked behind the bookshelf in the back room. A wooden chest, small with rusted hinges and a latch that clicked open too easily. Inside, a handful of letters, delicate paper, faded ink. Love letters, it seemed, written by a man to a woman whose name Mara didn't recognize. The last letter was unfinished, and something about that stopped her cold. Because the final sentence read, "I'll find you when the rain comes. You know I always do." And now, here it was, the rain. She hadn't told Caleb about the letters. She didn't know why. Maybe it felt too personal, like opening someone else's heart without permission. Or maybe it was the way she'd felt reading those words, as if they were meant for her. The storm picked up, wind slipping under the eaves, whistling low like someone calling from the trees. Caleb set his mug down and looked at her. "You okay?" She nodded too quickly. "Just tired." He hesitated. Then, as if reading something behind her eyes, he touched her arm gently. "Come on, let's go lie down. Listen to the rain." The bedroom smelled like cedar and thyme. The sheets were cool, but the weight of the blankets was grounding, the kind of heaviness that quiets the mind. She curled beneath them, listening to Caleb breathe beside her, slow and steady. His hand found hers beneath the covers, fingers twining without effort. Outside, thunder rumbled low, like a far-off drumbeat. She was almost asleep when she heard it. A knock, not loud, not insistent, but real. Once, twice, she sat up. Caleb didn't move. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "Nothing. Maybe it had been a branch or her imagination. The storm could make the world feel strange, like time folded in on itself. She lay back down, heart tapping a little faster now. Then the knock came again. This time Caleb stirred. What was that? I don't know. They moved together quietly down the hall to the front door. Mara's pulse thudded in her ears as she reached for the knob. But when she opened it, nothing. No one, only rain. And then at her feet something small, a letter, dry despite the storm, folded neatly with her name written on the front. Not Mara, Marielle. She froze. That was her grandmother's name. Hands trembling, she opened it. You said you'd wait for me by the fire. I'm sorry it took me so long. Mara stepped back, throat tightening. Is it a prank? Caleb asked. But she didn't answer. She looked past him into the firelight still flickering in the living room. And for a moment, just a moment, there was the figure of a man sitting in the armchair reading. Then gone. The room was empty. She pressed the letter to her chest. Tears she hadn't felt building spilled over quietly. Caleb reached for her. Hey, what's going on? She didn't know how to explain, didn't know how to say that she'd felt something shift, as though the storm had peeled back a layer between now and then, as though someone had finally come home across years, across grief. They returned to bed in silence. Caleb wrapped an arm around her, and she let herself fall into it, into the warmth, into the now. The storm outside was louder, but inside it felt quieter somehow. She closed her eyes and dreamed of letters and lamplight, of a love that waited through time, and a rainstorm that softened everything it touched. And she slept, not afraid anymore. She drifted deeper, pulled beneath the surface of sleep like a stone sinking through still water. But her dreams were not dreams, they felt more like memories borrowed from someone else. The cottage appeared again, but different this time. Brighter, warmer. The furniture was new, the windows clearer, the walls painted a pale yellow that caught the light just right. She could hear laughter, a woman's voice, gentle and lilting, a man's steady and kind. They danced slowly in the kitchen, the kind of dance where feet barely move, but hearts speak in the silence between breaths. The woman, Marielle, had Mara's eyes. The man wore suspenders and soft leather shoes, and when he looked at her, it was the way Caleb looked at her now, as if seeing everything she was and everything she wasn't yet. The woman whispered something into the man's shoulder. Mara couldn't hear it, but she felt the words settle in her chest like a lullaby she once knew. Then the image blurred like wet paint running in the rain, and she was back in the present, back in the dark room with Caleb's breath soft behind her ear. But something had changed. The air felt charged, humming with the quiet kind of energy that comes before the truth arrives. The floor creaked again, not like before, slower, closer. She opened her eyes and turned toward the sound. At first she thought it was a shadow, a trick of the flickering firelight from down the hall, but it moved with purpose. A silhouette standing just at the doorway of the bedroom, not threatening, just there, watching, waiting. Mara sat up, heart caught somewhere between fear and wonder. Caleb, she whispered, not sure if she wanted him to wake or not. He stirred slightly, muttering something incoherent, but didn't wake, as if whatever was happening wasn't for him. The shadow stepped forward, and she saw it clearly now. The man from the chair, from the photograph she'd seen earlier in the hallway, the one in the old silver frame, half hidden behind a curtain of dust. He looked almost real, almost young, and his eyes, they held such sorrow, but not danger. He held something in his hand. Slowly he extended it to her, a photograph. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it. The moment she touched it, the room shifted, just a breath but enough. She blinked down at the photo, two people standing beneath a tree in bloom, Marielle and the man, but something about the background caught her eye. A stone bench, a broken fence. She had seen that place, behind the cottage just past the garden's edge. She slipped out of bed gently, careful not to wake Caleb. The air was cold against her skin, but she barely felt it. She moved on instinct, guided more by feeling than thought. The storm had quieted some, like it too was holding its breath. She pulled on a sweater and boots, grabbed the flashlight from the shelf, and stepped into the rain. It was lighter now, a soft drizzle, the kind that kisses rather than soaks. The backyard was overgrown but familiar. She passed the rusted swing set, the crumbling bird bath, and stopped at the old fence line. There it was, the bench, worn and moss-covered, but unmistakable. She approached slowly, and there, just beneath it, something caught the light. A small tin box, the kind people used to hide love notes or keepsakes. She crouched, fingers numb, and pried it open. Inside, another letter, this one sealed. She didn't open it right away. She just held it, standing in the rain that now felt like silk, as if it had been waiting all this time to touch her. Then she turned and saw him again, the man. This time he wasn't sad. He smiled, nodded once, and faded into the mist. Mara stood there a long moment, heart slow and full. Then she walked back inside, past the sleeping house, and returned to bed beside Caleb. He stirred just enough to pull her close again, as if he'd missed her in those few minutes she'd been gone. She held the unopened letter against her chest, the paper still warm from her hand. She didn't know what it would say, but somehow she already knew how it would feel. The letter stayed tucked beneath her pillow as she drifted back into that hazy in-between place where sleep and waking thread through each other like waves against a quiet shore. The warmth of the covers cocooned her, the steady rise and fall of Caleb's breathing grounding her in the now, even as her thoughts reached towards something older, deeper. In her dream, or maybe not a dream, she stood in the kitchen again. The light was golden, the scent of lavender and cinnamon hanging in the air like memory. The radio played softly, crackling an old tune that sounded like it had waited half a century to be heard again. Marielle sat at the table, hair pinned back, hands folded around a cup of tea that steamed like breath in the morning. She looked up at Mara, eyes glinting with recognition. "You found it," she said. Not a question, not a surprise. Mara tried to speak, but her voice caught. Her throat felt thick with emotion she couldn't name. Marielle reached across the table and touched her hand. "He waited for me longer than he should have, and I let too much time pass. But love," she said, squeezing gently, "has a way of folding time. Sometimes it waits, sometimes it finds another way through." Mara opened her mouth to ask how, but the dream or memory began to shift again. The kitchen faded, replaced by the soft hum of night, the hush of rain against the windows, and Caleb's fingers gently brushing her arm. "You're trembling," he whispered, voice sleepy. "I'm okay," she murmured, but she wasn't sure if she meant it fully. She reached under her pillow, pulled out the letter, and held it up between them. He blinked at it, then at her, his brow creasing in that small, protective way he had when he didn't understand but wanted to. She sat up, unfolded the paper slowly. It opened without resistance, as if it had never truly been sealed to begin with. The handwriting was careful, looping unmistakably his the man from the photo, from the doorway, from the firelight. "My dearest Mario, if you're reading this, it means you stayed. Thank you. I know I'm gone by now or somewhere you can't yet reach, but I believe in echoes. I believe in soft places where the veil thins and love can pass through without permission. I waited every spring. Every time the wind came from the east, I hoped it would carry you back. I left pieces behind, letters, photos, the sound of your voice on the stairs, because I couldn't let the world forget you. Not completely, not quietly. I loved you in silence. I love you still, wherever you are. And I think, maybe, you came back to me in her." Mara's breath hitched. Caleb's arm wrapped around her waist, steadying her. "She was you," she whispered almost to herself. The silence after was full, not empty but full, as if the walls had taken a breath and were listening. Caleb brushed her hair back. "What does it mean?" She turned toward him, the letter still in her lap. I think she didn't finish her story, and somehow I'm helping her find the end." He didn't laugh or tease, didn't ask if she was serious. Instead, he nodded. "Then we'll stay for a little while." Outside, the storm softened to mist, the trees swaying with the ease of something finally exhaled. The firelight glowed brighter, the cottage warmer, the air lighter, as if a presence had been released, no longer bound by longing. And later, when the sky began to pale at the edges and the first quiet light of dawn slipped through the curtains, Mara and Caleb lay tangled together, hearts calm, breaths slow. The letter rested on the nightstand alongside the photograph, and neither felt the need to explain the other anymore. They would stay just for a while longer, maybe long enough for the garden to bloom again. Maybe long enough to find the rest of the letters. Maybe long enough to feel what Marielle never got the chance to finish. And maybe, just maybe, the story wasn't ending. It was just finally beginning to speak. Days passed, and the storm faded into a gentle drizzle, then to nothing at all, leaving behind a world softened by water. The roads once flooded and impassable had cleared, but the cottage still held them, quiet and steady. Mara and Caleb found a rhythm in the silence between them, an unspoken understanding that the house, this place that had been so filled with ghosts, was becoming something else. Each evening, Mara would wander the garden, now revived by the rain, the flowers stretching toward the sky as if reaching for something they couldn't yet see. The bench by the stone fence became a small sanctuary for her, a place where she'd sit with the photo, the letters, and the fading echo of a love that had crossed time. Caleb would often join her, leaning against the old oak tree, his eyes tracing her every movement, the way the light caught the curve of her cheek, or the way she held the letter close like a secret she wasn't quite ready to share. It wasn't easy finding peace in the places that had once felt heavy with unanswered questions, but in the days that followed, Mara discovered a kind of grace in the waiting, as if time itself had given them a gift, a pause in which to find each other again. One afternoon, just as the sun was beginning its slow descent, Caleb found her sitting on the stone steps of the back porch, the last of the autumn light casting a warm glow across her face. She was holding something, a small envelope she had found tucked beneath the roots of the oak tree earlier that day. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded it, and her breath caught in her throat. This letter was different, short, unadorned. I've watched you, seen how you've carried the past. I know now that love isn't meant to wait forever, but to be lived. Don't wait any longer. Live and let go. It was signed simply with all my heart, G. Mara let the letter fall from her hands, the wind sweeping it away as if it had never been there at all. Caleb crouched beside her, his voice soft. What does it mean? She swallowed hard, the weight of all the time between her and the woman she had never met, but somehow had always known settling heavy in her chest. It means, I think it's time. She took his hand, her thumb brushing the lines of his palm, not just for me, but for her too. He nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. For the first time, she didn't feel burdened by the past. She didn't feel the weight of the unfinished stories, the silences that had once seemed so loud. The house, the garden, the letters, these were all pieces of a story that she had stepped into, a story that had its own rhythm, its own heartbeat, but one that had never fully been hers. Now it was, and it was time to write her own. That night, as the cottage settled into the familiar hum of the night, Mara sat by the window, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the soft night sky. Caleb's voice came from the hallway, low and comforting. You okay? She smiled, her heart lighter than it had ever been. Yeah, I think I am. She turned back to the window, feeling a quiet warmth settle deep inside her, the kind that had been waiting to unfold all along. Outside, the trees swayed gently in the evening breeze, and the rain, though gone, still lingered in the air, fresh and alive. It smelled like new beginnings. She leaned back into Caleb's embrace as he joined her, and together they watched the stars. The world outside felt peaceful, almost too still, as if it too was waiting for what they didn't know. But they didn't need to, because the storm was over, the rain had passed, and now, in the quiet of the night, they were finally at rest. And there, wrapped in the calm of the world they had found together, Mara knew that they weren't just sleeping through the storm anymore. They were living through it, and everything had changed.